Hey guys, it's Pete Brazio again with AquaFX, here for another edition of AquaFX.net. Today we're going to be doing some unboxing and installation of our new media reactors. As you may know, media reactors are very good for keeping phosphate levels within check, eliminating unwanted tank pigments with carbon, as well as any other wide selection of medias that you can put in these reactors. Initially, we're going to offer two reactors, our Blue Tang reactor and then our extra large Blue Tang. Now, our traditional Blue Tang reactor comes with the option of having a submersible pump included or not included. Today we're going to be doing the included unit, full startup, and let's dig right in and see what we have. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the top of my packing tape. And the first thing I'm going to notice is a little bit of styrofoam to keep the unit safe during transit. Go ahead and pop this guy out, put him to the side. And now see, I've got my 1/2-inch blue tubing. I've got my reactor hang-on bracket. I've got my submersible pump. Another layer of styrofoam, go ahead and discard for the time being. And I'm gonna unpack my beautiful new AquaFX media reactor and make sure the box is empty, no other odds and ends. So traditionally, as with our RO units, we're gonna go ahead and inspect for any sort of flaws or damage that might have happened during shipping. I noticed that my acrylic is crack-free and everything seems to be in very good integrity, so I'm gonna go ahead and begin the installation of this reactor. First thing I'm going to do is unpack all the goodies that are inside my reactor. I'm going to lightly loosen the thumb screws that are on top of the acrylic. And by twisting the lid, I can then pop it off and simply place it on the table. Take note of the CNC machined O-ring that is on the lid. That will need to stay in place. And by pulling up the center tube, I'm going to pull out my top diffuser and my top sponge pad. Set them off to the side. I've got my instructions, installation fitting packet, a nice AquaFX sticker, as well as a roll of Teflon tape. Now take note, in the bottom of your reactor, you still have your diffuser plate as well as your media sponge. The first procedure that I like to do with my new reactor is go ahead and completely disassemble it and lightly rinse off the acrylic for any sort of residues that could have been left behind during the manufacturing process, just to make sure that it's 100% safe for your aquatic life. I went ahead and just filled my reactor up with some water to lightly rinse, and then go ahead and give it a jostle around, and go ahead and discard the water. I now have my freshly cleaned AquaFX reactor, and I'm going to go ahead and start assembling this along with my GFO media. So the first thing I'm going to put back in is my distribution tube with the diffuser plate and sponge. This will go ahead and just slide right in. The center of the tube will match up to a recessed hole that's in the bottom of the reactor, so just make sure that fits in nicely. I went ahead and pushed my diffuser plate and my media sponge to the bottom of the reactor with my hand. Be careful with your hand inside these reactors as they can become caught. It's kind of constrictive in there. Next thing I'm going to do is pour an appropriate amount of GFO media into my reactor so that we can begin the rinse process. For our traditional GFO, we recommend 1 tablespoon for every 4 gallons of water. However, if you have a larger tank and space is a concern, we can use our high capacity GFO, which you can use 1 tablespoon for every 8 gallons of water. To give you some quick comparison, if I had a 100-gallon tank, I would use about 1.75 cups of GFO, a regular capacity, and I would use about 0.78 cups of high capacity GFO. So you can quickly see some of the differences in the volumes that you would need. I'm going to be using my regular strength Phos Blaster GFO today, and I'm going to go ahead and open up my bag. This is a 1-pound bag. And I'm going to measure out about 1.5 cups. You'll notice that our GFO is very low in dust and is slightly higher in density than some of the other brands that you're going to see on the market, which means that it rinses faster and overall you have more media to use. My 1 pound of GFO media has come out to be just about 1 1/3 cup volume. I like my distribution tube to be centered in the reactor as I'm pouring in the media. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and take my thumb and plug the center distribution hole, and I will kind of just pour in my media around the distribution tube, using my thumb as just a plug to keep the media from going into the distribution tube. I now have my reactor full of my Foss Blaster GFO, and I'm going to go ahead and put my media sponge on first, and then my diffuser plate on top of the media sponge. Perfect. It is now safe to re-secure the lid back on, lining up the holes on the reactor, allowing the thumb screws to just slide into place. Then turn it. I've now twisted my lid back on. I'm going to go ahead and tighten down these thumb screws. Not with much force, but enough to allow the O-ring to make a nice seal on the top of the lid of the reactor. I'm now going to go ahead and open up my little parts bag. And we'll see that we have a couple of fittings, locking clips, as well as a thumb screw for the reactor hang-on bracket. Taking note of the direction of the thread on the fitting, I'm now going to apply an appropriate amount of Teflon tape. It's always a good idea to leave approximately 1 thread loose for the beginning of the mating of the fitting to the top of the reactor. First, I'm going to just screw in the off-center fitting, which is important to note that the off-center fitting is also going to be the return into your aquarium. Give a couple of wraps to my feed fitting. Again, trying to leave 1 thread loose for the beginning of the threads as they meet one another. Now I'm going to make sure to position my initial elbow off to the side so that they don't collide into each other as I'm tightening them. There we go. I've now got my center fitting installed as well as my off-center fitting. Now again, the center fitting will be the feed from the aquarium into the reactor. My off-center fitting will be the feed from the reactor back into the aquarium. As you notice, the media, as all medias are generally, is a little bit dusty. So the first thing we're going to do is a nice rinse of the media. I'm going to take some of my supplied food grade safe tubing, and I'm going to go ahead and connect that to the inlet on my reactor, again the center fitting, which will be fed from the aquarium. I'm going to take my locking clip and go ahead and just join it around the feed tube to prevent any sort of slip-offs or spills. So now that I've got it on the barbed fitting, I can just go ahead and push it together until it's got a nice tight lock, and now that's on there real nice and secure. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and unplug my submersible adjustable pump. Packaging to the side. So I've got a couple of different supply type nipples for my pump. I'm going to go ahead and pick out the large one and just push that into the pump like so. I'm now going to take the other end of my food grade tubing, slip it onto this connection, and lock it down with another provided blue locking clip. Like so. So my submersible pump is now good to drop into the water so that we can begin to pump water through this media bed and give our GFO an initial rinse. If you notice, the pump has an adjustability on it. The positive is for maximum flow, the minus is for less flow or minimum flow all the way at the extreme. So after you submerge your pump, you're just going to have to take note of how your media is tumbling. You want a healthy tumble, but nothing too aggressive. Before I start my submersible pump, I'm going to make sure that my return fitting has somewhere appropriate to rinse the media. We don't want to rinse our initial carbon or GFO media right into our display tank. We can put it into a side bucket or even somewhere down the trash, waste, whatnot. So go ahead and connect my return line from my reactor. And again, using my last locking clip, we'll go ahead and just make a nice tight connection. So my reactor should be in good shape now to begin rinsing. Now that I have my submersible pump in my sump and I've got my return line somewhere where I can rinse it, I'm going to go ahead and just give my media a nice rinse, plugging in the pump now. And what I should start to see happen is water entering my fluidized reactor, and there it goes. You can now see water entering the column, and it's going to go ahead and fill up, and you can kind of see some dust separating itself. And that's why we're doing this. We're going to go ahead and just let that dust and fines, if you're using carbon media, go ahead and just rinse itself right off. And just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to show the water leaving here, and we should see it go from a rust red orange kind of to a clear color. And then once we hit the clear color, the water will be okay for the return back into our aquarium. Here we can see some of that initial rinse. Nice orange red for the GFO media. And within a minute or two, we would expect this to go pretty clear. So we're just going to go ahead and wait for that to happen. As I've rinsed my GFO media, I'm going to go ahead and look for a light tumbling with the GFO itself. I now have my GFO media properly rinsed, and it's a good idea to check your effluent phosphate levels, make sure they're where you need them to be. If you need more phosphate removal, you can decrease the flow rate through the pump to allow for better contact time. One other thing I would like to touch on is our reactor mounting bracket. The mounting bracket is intended to hold the reactor to your aquarium or sump area, but is intended to be mounted underneath the reactor. So what I like to do is go ahead and lightly loosen 4 screws, and of course do this while your unit is not in operation, otherwise you may have a slight leak. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and get these thumb screws to be flush with the bottom plate of the reactor. Feeling it with my finger, once they reach the inside of the thread, they would be about flush. Boom. So I'll now take my reactor mounting plate and go ahead and just fix it underneath, lining up the threaded holes on the mounting plate with the thumb screw. And you should feel it catch the thread without too much resistance. And the other 3 holes should line up pretty nicely from there. Now that my hang-on bracket is attached, I will go ahead and re-secure all of my thumb screws just to make sure we don't have any sort of a leak. The reactor is now good to hang on the side of any aquarium or sump that you are using this reactor with. This has been the installation of your AquaFX Blue Tang reactor, as well as the rinsing of our AquaFX Phos Blaster media. It is important to handpick which media you want to go inside your reactor. We offer several different types of GFO as well as carbon for the aquarium setup. So talk to us, go ahead and shoot us an email, or talk to somebody at your local fish store when picking your medias. Any questions, we always welcome your emails to us here at sales@aquaee.com. That's AQUA, 2-letter E's like Edward.com. Or you could give us a call at 877-256-3467. And until next time, guys, I really appreciate you joining us. Thanks. This is Pete with AquaFX.